Everything you think makes you unique may have already been decided before you were even born. The way you laugh, the way you get angry, the way you fall in love or run from it, the jokes you find funny, the fears you can't explain. You think you built all of that. You think it's yours. But what if I told you? Most of it was already written down, like a recipe, before you ever took your first breath. Let's start small. Think about your best friend, the one who's loud in every room they walk into. Now think about your quiet cousin, the one who needs 3 days to recover from a party. Were they born like that? Or did life make them that way? Here's the twist nobody tells you. It's both. And the ratio might shock you. Scientists have spent decades studying twins. Not just regular twins. Identical twins who were separated at birth and raised by completely different families, in completely different countries, who never knew the other existed. No shared house. No shared parents. No shared culture. You'd expect them to turn out like strangers, right? They didn't. In one famous case, 2 identical twins were separated just weeks after birth. One grew up in a strict, religious household. The other grew up with a completely different family, different beliefs, different rules. Decades later, when researchers finally brought them together, they found something eerie. Both of them bit their nails the same way. Both married women with the same first name. Both named their dogs the same name. Both drove the same brand of car. Coincidence? Maybe. But this pattern showed up again and again across hundreds of separated twin studies. Same gestures, same fears, same humor, even when the houses, the countries, and the religions were nothing alike. So here's the question your brain should be screaming right now. If personality were just shaped by upbringing, how do you explain that? This is where it gets interesting. Imagine your personality is like a cake. Genetics is the recipe, the exact list of ingredients, written before you were born. Flour, sugar, eggs, baking time. You don't choose the recipe. It's handed to you the moment your parents' DNA combines. But here's the twist. A recipe alone doesn't make a cake. You need an oven. You need someone to actually bake it. That's your environment, your family, your culture, your friends, the random things that happen to you growing up. Same recipe, different oven, slightly different cake. That's why identical twins, same genetic recipe, can still turn out a little different. Not because the recipe changed, but because the oven did. Now pause for a second. Doesn't that feel a little uncomfortable? Because it means a huge chunk of you was decided before you ever made a single choice. Let's go deeper, because there's a second twist hiding inside the first one, and this one isn't even about your family. It's about something much bigger. Your country. Anthropologists and researchers who study people across the world have found something strange. If you take thousands of people from East Asia and thousands of people from Western Europe and measure their personalities using the same tests, you don't just get random results. You get patterns. People from East Asian cultures tend to score lower on extroversion. People from Western European cultures tend to score higher on conscientiousness, meaning they're more organized, more disciplined, more rule-following on average. Now here's the part that should bother you. That's not because East Asians are born quieter or because Europeans are born more disciplined. It's because the culture around them, for generations, rewarded certain behaviors and punished others. Be loud and stand out in a culture built on group harmony, and you get corrected. Be loud and stand out in a culture built on individual achievement, and you get praised. Do that enough times, across enough generations, in enough families, and it starts looking like national personality. Except nobody was born with it. It was trained into an entire population, like a slow, invisible group project nobody signed up for. And it's not even just country to country. Researchers studying personality within a single country, just looking at different states and regions, still find clear, consistent personality differences depending on where someone grew up. Same language, same national history, same passport, different personality averages, just based on geography. So if where you were born can shape something as deep as how outgoing or disciplined you are, how much of you is really you? And how much of it is just the average personality of the people who happen to raise you, in the place you happen to land? There's an even stranger twist buried in here. Anthropologists have pointed out that the entire idea of personality being something private, something that belongs to you as an individual, is itself a cultural invention. In a lot of Western countries, people are raised to believe their personality is their own personal property, separate from everyone else, something they discover and express. But in many other cultures around the world, identity isn't even thought of that way. Who you are is treated as something that exists between people, through relationships and roles and responsibilities, not as some private internal thing locked inside your head. Sit with that for a second. Even the belief that I own my personality might just be a personality trait of your culture, not a universal truth, a regional opinion that got mistaken for a fact. Let's go even deeper, because there's a third twist hiding inside the second one. Scientists estimate that genetics accounts for somewhere around 40 to 60% of your personality. Not 100%, not 0%, somewhere in the middle, which means the other half of you, comes from somewhere else. So where does it come from? Here's where most people guess wrong. They assume it's your parents, the way they raised you, the rules they set, the love or the yelling. Surely that's the missing piece, right? Wrong. Or at least, not mostly. Researchers found something strange when they studied siblings who grew up in the exact same house, with the exact same parents, the exact same rules. If parenting style was the secret ingredient, these siblings should turn out fairly similar in personality. But they often don't. Two kids raised by the same mom and dad, in the same home, can end up with wildly different personalities. One anxious, one relaxed, one extroverted, one shy. So if it's not fully genetics, and it's not fully shared upbringing either, what's left? This is the part that breaks people's brains a little. It's the random stuff. The stuff nobody plans. A teacher who humiliated you in front of the class when you were 8. A best friend who moved away right when you needed them most. A near accident that made you cautious for life. A single comment from a stranger that planted a seed of doubt you still carry today. Psychologists call this the non-shared environment. Translation: the random, personal, unscripted moments life throws at you. The ones your siblings never experienced the same way, even if you grew up under the same roof. Think of your personality like a piece of clay. Genetics gives you the type of clay: soft, hard, stretchy, dense. Your culture and family shape the rough form. But the fingerprints? The tiny dents, the cracks, the smooth spots? Those come from 1,000 random little moments nobody remembers but you. So here's where the story takes its biggest turn yet. If your personality is a mix of a recipe you didn't choose, a country and culture you didn't pick, a family environment you didn't fully control, and random moments that hit you when you weren't paying attention, then how much of you did you actually create? Let that sit for a second. Now, some people hear this and panic a little. They think, so I'm just a robot following a script? Not exactly. Here's the part that makes this less scary and more fascinating. Even though the ingredients were handed to you, you still control how they get used. Two people can inherit the same trait, say, a short temper, and end up in completely different places. One learns to channel it into competitiveness and becomes a fierce athlete. The other lets it spiral and pushes people away. Same raw material, different outcome. Think of it like being handed a deck of cards before the game even starts. You didn't choose the cards. You didn't shuffle the deck. You didn't even pick the table you're sitting at. But you do choose how you play each hand. This is where psychologists introduce a concept that quietly changes everything. Temperament versus character. Temperament is the stuff you're born with, your natural reactions, your instincts, your gut-level responses. Character is what you build on top of that, through choices, effort, and reflection. Temperament might whisper, run from conflict. Character can choose to stay and have the hard conversation anyway. Temperament might say be impulsive. Character can learn patience. The clay is shaped before you arrive, but you can still keep sculpting. Here's another twist, though, and it's the one that really messes with people. Even your choices, the ones you think prove you're in control, are influenced by your wiring too. The same brain chemistry that makes you crave risk also makes you more likely to choose that thrilling job, that risky relationship, that bold business idea. Your choices are happening through a brain you didn't design, shaped by a culture you didn't choose, in a body you didn't ask for. So is there a real you underneath all of this? Or is you just the sum of a genetic recipe, a random environment, an inherited culture, and a brain reacting to all three at once? Scientists don't fully agree. Some say personality is like a fixed personality set point you're born close to, and life events only nudge you slightly away before you drift back. Like a rubber band, stretch it during a hard year, a heartbreak, a big achievement, and you might act differently for a while. But eventually, it snaps back, close to where it started. Others disagree completely. They argue personality is more like a river, constantly carving new paths depending on what life throws at it. No fixed point, no snapping back, just continuous change, shaped by every relationship, every failure, every win. Which one is true? Maybe both, just at different speeds. The deep stuff, how anxious you are by default, how much you crave social energy, how sensitive you are to stress, that might be close to fixed, like the riverbed itself. But the moment-to-moment version of you, the way you show up in different seasons of your life, that part can still shift, like water flowing differently depending on the rocks in its path. So back to the original question. Why doesn't anybody truly own their personality? Because the recipe was written before you arrived. The oven was chosen by people you didn't pick. The culture that decided which version of you to praise and which version to correct was set centuries before your name was ever spoken. And the random sparks that shaped your deepest fears and quirks happened in moments you didn't even realize mattered at the time. And yet, somehow, you're still the only one holding the spoon now. Still the only one deciding how the next part of the cake gets baked. So maybe the real question isn't, is my personality really mine? Maybe it's this. Now that you know where it came from, what are you going to do with it?